Welcome, everyone. My name is Sue Pagashnik, and I'm the marketing manager here at RightSoft. We're so pleased to be partnering with SYSPRO to sponsor today's warehouse evaluation webinar, Questions to Drive Success. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to handle a couple of housekeeping items. First, today's webinar is being recorded, and all of the attendees will be in listen-only mode. Attendees will receive a recording of the webinar after it airs. The webinar will last about 45 minutes or so today, and we'll leave time at the end to answer your questions. But if you do have questions during the webinar, feel free to submit it in the Q&A window. So I think that covers our housekeeping items. Garrett, are you ready to get started?
Oh, always ready, Sue. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right. Again, thanks everybody for taking the time to join us for today's webinar. As just a brief introduction of myself, my name is Garrett Lenzen. I'm kind of the do-it-all here from sales, implementation, account management, and we also have another team member here from RightSoft. Ryan, could you introduce yourself?
Yep. My name is Ryan Heslop. I lead our implementation and support team here at RightSoft. And yeah, thrilled to be here. Thrilled to kind of share some questions to go over warehouse management and how to better your processes. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. And just some brief introduction to RightSoft if you are not aware of us before, but a couple different things. So we do have a lot of SYSPRO expertise. We have over 19 years within the SYSPRO industry here. So a long-standing relationship with the SYSPRO team, as we do have a few of them here on the call as well with us today, which is very appreciative of them for helping support this webinar. We are a certified ISV partner with SYSPRO, and one of the biggest things that you might not have heard, or some of the changes that have been made over the last year and a half, is that SYSPRO has chosen to white label RightScan as its own solution, now formally known as Mobile Warehouse for SYSPRO. So we're extremely excited about the opportunities to bring this solution to you to give you a better encompassing package from a core SYSPRO standpoint and from a WMS standpoint. Now, the goal of our application is really to build that simple plug and play solution that you can quickly implement and get up and running within your business as fast as possible, while also creating those standard processes within your organization to help you scale and grow more effectively and more efficiency, while supporting those end users out there on the floor to make their day-to-day life that much easier. Now, we are going to turn our cameras off for the remaining portion just from a bandwidth perspective. And if you do have any questions, again, feel free to put them into the Q&A and we'll be able to answer them either as we go or towards the end at the Q&A portion. Now, as we go through the agenda here, so there's going to be a few different things that we cover today. Number one, we're going to be asking some questions. Why do we want to evaluate your warehouse? What are the big things that you should be asking just in yourself to prepare you for a project like an WMS implementation? So some of those key questions are going to be focused around the technology that you use, the employees, the warehouse, and the general environment. What questions are going to give you as that organization enough information to help effectively engage with different team members or different parties to be able to successfully implement a solution like Mobile Warehouse? Then we'll jump into a live demonstration based off of a few different customer stories, so you get to see and feel how that software can interact within your environment and what are some of the benefits that you'll be able to see based off of that. And then after that demonstration portion, we'll open it up for Q&A. So feel free, again, think as we're going through this, any questions that you might have, one come all, bring them. All right, Ryan, I'm going to hand this portion off to you. Why do we want to evaluate our warehouse first? So some of the things as to why do we evaluate our warehouse is looking at some of the inefficiencies and bottlenecks. We're all business leaders here today. So what are we looking to accomplish with that is making sure we're becoming as efficient as possible and identifying those bottlenecks that are going to create stress within that environment and ultimately hold us back from some of that growth. Manual processes and inventory errors. I know that is the bane of the existence for anybody that's within production, inventory control, or anybody that's dealing with that inventory within the warehouse. How do we reduce those manual transactions and processes to make us more efficient, to get that data into SYSPRO within real time? And then finding what's misaligned from what we're having from a physical standpoint to what SYSPRO is ultimately telling us within that environment. So where is our inventory actually, and how much of it do we have, so we can appropriately plan for production or appropriately plan for the orders that we ultimately have to fulfill? And then giving us that ability to prepare for growth and scalability. Like I said, we all want to grow as a business. It all comes down to money at the end of the day. So how do we make more of that? And what are the tools that you implement to make you get to that point as that organization? And then looking at some of that lack of visibility, right? We want to make sure that there's no black holes that exist within that environment where anybody within the organization can see the information and make as effective decisions based off of the information that's provided to you. And a lot of this is to solve some of those top challenges that anybody in today's world is facing. And that's dealing with the rising costs of our raw goods. Our finished goods are going up, the cost of our labor is going up, and even the gap that employees have in today's world of some of the different skill sets that they have and how can they ultimately manage it, as you have a lot of users phasing out, going into retirement, with a lot of young new employees that are coming in, and how do we get them up to speed as fast as possible? All right, Ryan, now I'm going to hand this off to you so that you can ask some of the warehouse questions.
Sounds good. Thanks, Garrett. All right, so let's start by looking at your warehouse structure. What does this mean? So really, these questions are really about making sure that what's happening on your warehouse floor matches what's happening in your SYSPRO environment, and that your physical layout is working for you and not against. We're all about ridding ourselves of bottlenecks here and not creating them. So kind of looking at this slide here, first, does your physical bins match your digital bins in SYSPRO? So mismatches, they can create confusion, mispicks, and ultimately a lot of wasted time. So making sure that your physical bins match what you have systematically, very, very important. Next, are your bins and your stock items clearly labeled and barcoded? This is huge for reducing errors and speeding up your task and task management. Then you might want to look at keeping your fast moving items up to date. Are they easy for your pickers to grab, or are they buried in the back? This is where utilizing FIFO or FEFO practices can really help your process. Then you also want to consider some of your high traffic areas. Is there enough space for your people or forklifts to move safely and efficiently? Do you frequently have jam ups? With all these high traffic areas, is your signage up to date? Maybe this is a good time for you to look at updating if you have any continual improvement boards like 5S, or maybe a good time to improve upon it. And finally, looking at using palletization or license plating to track some of your larger quantities more efficiently, doing full pallet movements. These are different, physical structure layout questions that you should be asking yourselves. And these might seem like simple questions, but these small improvements here can make a huge difference in your accuracy, speed, and safety at the end of the day. So now, once you've looked at your physical warehouse needs and your wants, you may want to start looking at some of your more people-oriented questions and how we're getting the most productivity out of our employees. So as I talk about employees, what is your most valuable assets? Your people. So these questions are here to figure out where your team's time is going and whether they're spending it on tasks that add value or not. So something I ask all of our clients at the start of any implementation is, how do you measure employee productivity today? Do you have a method of tracking this? Do you really know who's working efficiently and who might need a little bit of help? Then start thinking about some of your biggest time wasters. What tasks are eating up the most hours in a typical day? Is there a lot of manual data entry that's happening? Things like receiving, picking, or packing. Manual work usually means and leads to more errors and more lost time. So a lot of areas of opportunity there. Next, where are you spending most of your times, and are you spending time on things that don't directly move your business forward, like searching for lost inventory, chasing paperwork, or fixing mistakes? Another big one is, are your employees frustrated with your current process or processes? Maybe you want to look at your training. How quickly Can you get a new hire up and productive and up to speed? Do they struggle with learning the ropes? If so, why? And finally, what you want to really kind of look at and think about is your workforce scheduling. Are you balancing your people effectively with order volume and seasonal demand? Answering these questions can really help you pinpoint exactly where you can save time, reduce errors, and make your team's job easier so that they can focus on things that really drive results. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to Garrett, and he'll talk about some of the automation and technology in the space.
Yeah, so now after you've answered some of those questions, you've taken the time to go through the warehouse, identifying what that warehouse structure looks like, and getting answers to the questions that you've asked of yourselves. And from the employee standpoint, it really comes then to what technology and what different tools are we using for automating that environment? Do we have anything in place today? Where are we starting from? And so some of the key questions that you look at internally and in discussion with your IT team, your production team, your operations team, do we even have an effective warehouse management system in place? What are we using to control our inventory? Is it SYSPRO just in itself? Is it SYSPRO with Excel spreadsheets? Is it an Access database? Is it an aging, custom solution? What do we use today to help manage that inventory? And then it helps drill down into some of the questions. Okay, we've identified what we are using. Now, what does that specific solution do for us? Is it real time? Is it able to update your SYSPRO inventory in a real time manner? Yes or no? That's a very important question to answer, because it's going to help identify, is there a gap in the information that we actually have when we come back and say, hey, our inventory is off? Well, what's the root cause of our inventory being off? And that could be that there's a gap from when your current system updates your SYSPRO environment. And then how well does some of the other ancillary pieces actually integrate to SYSPRO or within your current ERP system? Is it the handheld devices that are being used? Is it a label printing solution, a shipping solution? How do all of these things coexist within each other to make it one smooth flow? Is there any gaps within those solutions that cause, a nightmare to happen? Or if one piece of it fails, the whole process fails, right? And then start looking at with labeling in itself is, how do we get labels on our product, right? What tools are we using to label the inventory that is coming in within our environment? Is it a Word document? Is it SYSPRO's Crystal Reports? Is it using Bartender as a label printing solution, or any of the label printing solutions that are out there in the space? And how does that ultimately get the data to print it and apply that for that user out there on the floor for that inventory? And then can you even automate it, right? Can you make that process a more automated fashion, so where that I, as an end user, don't have to go and sit back down at a computer to print the labels that are necessary for that product? And then it comes into some of the higher level thinking of, do we even have wireless infrastructure within our warehouse? If yes, great. And if no, what do we need to do about that to get that infrastructure in place? Do we have to talk to our IT team or an external third party IT to come in and do a on-site review of what availability do we have to get some access points put in place? And then it comes down to looking at the hardware in itself. What hardware are our employees capable of using? Is it something that's more of a handheld scanner? Is it a tablet? Is it even a cell phone? We all know that everyone's capable of using cell phones, so that's not a great excuse. But what devices are they capable of using to be as effective as possible within that environment? So it's really starting to just look at, what technology items do we have in place within this current environment, and then laying out the plan of, where do we want to go within the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, as to how are we ultimately going to get there now that we know where we do want to ultimately end up. Now that brings us to some of just the roadblock questions, right? Everybody has doubts. Everybody has fears when you're going through an implementation. So it's starting to identify, what are some of those doubts? What are those fears, or something that's going to cause a stoppage in this project from happening? Is it an employee perspective, where like employees feel that they're not going to adopt the system that they need to, right? Because they're afraid of the change. They've been doing it the same way for 30 years as they've been working for that organization. how well are they going to adopt it? That's a very common roadblock that we see in discussions with anybody that's looking at implementing a new system. And then it's identifying, again, after we asked all these questions, those gaps. Is there a roadblock within those gaps that we have from a software perspective? Can that software that we're looking at implement handle our business processes, or do we need to look at changing the process and how we even use any of the ancillary systems, or even what we're doing today within SYSPRO to get that intended benefit? I know, Ryan, that's more from a sales side, but what do you see more from an implementation side as you're working hands-on directly with these customers during the implementation?
Yeah, so something that I see quite often throughout an implementation is some of the roadblocks is that every successful implementation really hinges on having a focused team, making sure they're aligned and all moving in the same direction. It kind of goes back to some of the people productivity questions we hit on earlier, but really to drive, meaningful change in your warehouse or your process, everyone must be on board, rowing in the same direction, ready to embrace the challenge. It might sound cheesy, but it is true. Really, the team's commitment and readiness it's really the key factors that determine the success or failure of implementation. It might sound a bit harsh, but it is true. And it's something that we see in implementation time and time again.
All right. So moving on to just some of the customer stories that we've experienced and from successful implementations that are using mobile warehouse today. So the first customer story that we're covering is a plumbing and heating manufacturer. And one of the biggest challenges that they ultimately came to us with is they had a lot of manual processes that were in place and using a lot of that paperwork to drive that manual process of getting data entered into SYSPRO. Now, this specific customer, as they went through this process of identifying the gaps, the issues that they had that are leading them to this point to identify the solution to solve it. And some of the biggest things that they uncovered was we have data lags, right? So at the end of the paper process, as the employee worked with the paper, worked with the inventory, wrote down on that piece of paper of exactly what was being received in, it would get turned into a basket at the receiving station. And within that basket, that paper would fill in as they would receive in multiple trucks within a day or multiple POs from the same truck. So you'd have this big stack of paper that would get turned into an office at the end of the day for a clerk within purchasing to go through and do the manual entry of that paperwork into SYSPRO. So that paper's been touched 2 times by 2 different employees before it ever updates SYSPRO to have an appropriate amount of inventory. And as part of this is they weren't clearly identifying what that inventory was. There was no labeling that was ultimately being used during that time. So downstream, they were feeling the effects of going into their environment, not having an accurate number of what inventory existed for that given day, and then not being able to clearly identify, well, is this the product that I do need that's a high mover that needs to be here to fulfill that sales order that could have been going out at the end of the day instead of the next following day. So they took the look at these challenges that they were having, and they came to us to identify what could we ultimately do about it. So using mobile warehouse, they use PO receiving quite aggressively to be able to get the inventory into their environment and update SYSPRO in real time, and then automate the label printing process so they could apply the label immediately as it's received in and apply it to the product and prep that to be put away into inventory. And ultimately, what that led to for them as an organization was an accurate inventory as it was received in, allowing them to be more prepared for any sort of production issue or sales order issue as they had an updated inventory count to know, can we run this job in production, or can we fulfill this sales order in an appropriate amount of time to satisfy the customer's needs? And we will be demoing based off of this specific customer story after we go through the next one. So task management is the next customer story. Now this takes it to a next step, right? We go from how do we get an immediate win right now, but once implementation is complete, what are the next things that you can do? Now, very similar to our previous customer story, this one is post or previous to the PO receiving process, and they're a beverage manufacturer. So they go through and have a challenge with updating locations and doing put away movements and replenishments from either a staging bin that they've received their inventory into, or moving it from an overstock location to update a pick face location for them to consume that inventory, whether if it's for production or for a sales order. So again, it followed that same process of they had a manual paper-based process where they would go through and have basically a sheet that they would write down their bin transfers on. And they would do that throughout the entirety of the day, take that bin transfer sheet, put it in a basket. Someone then in SYSPRO would sit down and record all of the bin transfers for that product. Now, that same product could have moved twice within that time that that inventory was recorded within SYSPRO. And the challenge with that is it's not accurately updating the specific bin location that it exists in at the moment that it exists in it, right? So creating a discrepancy of, do I have enough inventory systematically to fulfill that sales order or that production order that we're needing to run? Physically, it's all there, but systematically, I, as somebody that's in production, was struggling to say, yes, we can run this job because we do have enough to ultimately consume, so we can put it into production. Or I, as customer service, are saying, no, we don't have enough of that inventory to fulfill that order out of that specific bin location. So one of the things that they did is they first introduced bin transfers. So getting that process real time to be able to scan the product that's labeled after receiving and perform the bin transfer. Now it takes it to the next step further of guiding them on where should they be putting this product and what product should they be moving. So as part of SYSPRO, what they do is they use a report building min-max values against the bin locations. So within that min-max value for their specific pick face locations for that stock code, it helps them understand big picture, how much inventory do we have? And if we go below the max or below the min value, we need to do a replenishment. So a task within mobile warehouse can be created and assigned to a user to be able to take that transfer, move that product from overstock, and put it away into that pick face location. So that way, when everyone's filling or fulfilling sales orders, they can go there, fulfill that sales order as quickly and as efficiently as possible. They didn't want anybody standing around looking at overstock locations to identify, is there enough inventory in an overstock location to fulfill that inventory? So it's giving them further tools to be able to be more efficient and direct users on what they can do. So that's going to bring us over to the demonstration of this. So we're going to start with PO receiving. So I'm going to sign into Mobile Warehouse here using my SYSPRO credentials. Again, I'm going to be doing this on a few different devices. So it's going to be starting on my laptop and then moving to a handheld, as this application is web-based and allows you to find what device is going to work best for those employees within your specific environment. So we're going to log in here, and it's going to bring me to my home screen. So once we're at our home screen here, we're going to be able to navigate to the different applications or modules to perform the specific transactions. So here we are at the home screen. I'm seeing some of my trend lines, which we'll come back to towards the end from a visibility standpoint. But I'm seeing those trend lines as they're going to adjust after I perform these transactions. Now I'm going to switch this to my handheld view here, right? Because that's where most organizations are being as effective as possible, is using that mobile scanner to be able to scan those barcodes, provide the content, and perform that transaction. So first thing, I'm going to use my nav menu here on the left-hand side, and we're going to navigate to my pick and receiving package and select PO receive. So now I have a list of POs. And now again, tying this back to that customer story, one of the things that we worked on together and collaborated with that specific customer was a challenge that they had was they have a truck that will deliver multiple POs from the same vendor. And one thing that they needed was, well, I've got product from PO1 at the front of the door, and then I've got product from PO1 at the back of the truck. So how can I effectively receive in all this product at one time for their associated POs? And so one thing that we did in collaboration was to be able to multi-select multiple POs and receive them in at one time. Now, again, that's not the case for every specific vendor or every customer, but it's some of those things that you can look forward to of how do we collaborate to make a more encompassing solution for everybody. So we're only going to receive in against this one PO, and I can either do and scan a barcode for the PO number. I can select it out of my list, or I could type in that PO because everybody's environment is going to be a little bit different with the availability of things to scan, with the ultimate goal of getting to as much scanning as possible. So now, as I've selected PO 1163 to begin my receipt process. So the truck is backed up to the door. We're starting that offloading process. Now I've got two different stock codes that are going to be coming in against this specific PO. And I've got 100 quantities required for each line. So again, I can either leverage a supplier or manufacturer's barcode that's coming in if that's something that is available to you, or you could choose to create your own internal labels to be able to apply that to your product. So if I do have those internal or those manufacturer or supplier labels, I can actually scan that barcode to be able to select what stock code I'm receiving in, just to help with the validation that this is the appropriate stock code that I'm bringing in. Now here's where I'm going to do some of that visual check. How much quantities do I have of this specific product? I do have my quantity of 100 here, so I'm going to enter my quantity of 100. And if the cases come in within my environment, there might be ever scenarios where you have multiple units of measure. So you can select a drop down here. If that product has multiple units of measure, you could either choose to receive it in as those different units of measure, whether if it's going to be by each, if it's by foot, if it's by case, if it's by pallet, whatever it is within your environment to allow you as the team member to be more effective. Now we're going to bring in our quantity of 100. It's coming into my warehouse N, which is against that purchase order header. And it's bringing it into a bin location. This is a multiple bin environment, which is going to give me that granularity of where exactly is that product within this specific warehouse. Now, I'm a big fan of implementing staging locations. So I can always receive in product into a staging location, which will then downstream help us drive a put away process to the appropriate bin location as to where should this exist based off of some of the values that we do have. Now, depending upon your environment and the inventory that you come in, if you have high volumes of inventory that come in, especially if they're on pallets, one thing that you could consider to get some of that efficiency is leveraging Mobile Warehouse's pallet tracking feature, which that pallet tracking gives you the ability to put a license plate to the group of product that exists on that pallet. As a unique identifier, then you can transact against that license plate to perform the movements or perform the material issues downstream to give you some of that efficiency and granularity of where that product exists and simplifying the transaction for that end user. Now I have my note and reference, right? So the note reference fields are the exact same what you would see if you're performing this transaction within SYSPRO. But some of the tips and tricks with this is within these fields, you can default information to be able to create that audit trail from core SYSPRO to mobile warehouse, being able to tie the two together. So that way, when you are segregating the duties of employees from this person is no longer having full control over what data is getting entered into SYSPRO, they at least still get to view what was entered into SYSPRO against that PO and by who did it and what system did it. So giving you full transparency across SYSPRO and your mobile warehouse system. And now we're going to hit save. And that's going to save my line and prep that line to be received in. And now we're going to go through the next line that's coming in. So again, I do not have a barcode for this specific product. So I'm going to select my lot 111 here. Now this one is a lot traceable stock code. So this is just covering for any of those organizations that have that a little bit additional complexity from a stock perspective, where they do have to have a lot or a serial number. So again, same process. We're going to receive in our quantity. So we do have a quantity of 150. Now, maybe I, as the employee, made a mistake here, right? And it's coming into my same receiving bin location, my staging area. Now, I also have to apply a lot number. Now, that lot number is going to be either whatever I choose to put into that field as the employee, or you might have a specific lot format that you already use today for any of your lot traceable goods. Or if you do consume and keep your vendor's lot number and carry that forward into your system, you could apply that there as well. So using the different methods of entry of I can manually create the lot, or I could use lot generation within SYSPRO to create those lot numbers, just finding what works best for your organization. For today's scenario, this customer goes through and they actually just manually apply a lot number. So we're going to use just today's date as that example. So that's our lot number. That's just the code that we use. And now I can choose to set my lot expiration date if that's applicable for your employee. One of the nice things to have with this is there's a field against your stock code called a shelf life in SYSPRO. If you do leverage that, especially if you're in that food and bev industry, leverage shelf life so that way it can automatically calculate what that expiration date should be for that lot. And again, same thing per pallet. My note and reference all remains the same, but now when I hit save, I'm going to get a warning message. So these warning messages are here to help guide the user on what they can and cannot do within the system, right? Let the system be the brain on what exactly are they allowed to do. So this is telling me you're about to over receipt this order. Are you sure you'd like to continue? Yes or no. If I hit no, it's going to bring me back to adjust my transaction. If I hit yes, it's going to allow me to continue. Now, one of the really nice things about this is that you can even set thresholds. So common business practice might be that we do consistently over receipt or even under receipt from our vendor. So you can set that threshold to allow that without providing you with that warning message to just say it's automatically acceptable because it's within our thresholds. So I'm going to hit yes. So we're going to continue on with that transaction. And now we've seen the screen update to where we have some color cues here. Those color cues are here to help guide me as the employee that's doing the receiving. Where are we at? Now, some are more logical with numbers and looking at the numbers in more detailed, and some are going to be less detailed where the color cues help guide them through that process. Now that we've got all of our lines in our product accounted for, we're going to be able to post this. So as I post, this updates your core side of SYSPRO in real time. My GRN number has been generated. I did get a post successful message down here at the bottom just to communicate to me that it was successful. And I can hit OK. Now here's something that's new, right? This is a fairly new feature that I'm bringing up to you, which is something that we call forms. So a form is different than a SYSPRO custom form field. This is more of just a WMS specific functionality where you can create different questions to be able to ask your employee either what did you accomplish or was there any sort of inspectable steps that you had to go through when you received in this inventory without that stock code being actually inspectable within SYSPRO. So it's just that nice to have to be able to answer a question to say, hey, the size was 10 by 10, the weight was 100 lb, so 100 pounds, and the color of this product was red, right? Just to be able to very simply ask what happened with this, what is this product? And the next step to it is putting pass or fails based off the value that you provided. So it's a really nice additional thing to gather additional information to create more visibility into what happened and allow you to report against it. So we'll post that form. And then we come into labeling, right? This is one of the big things that we hear a lot of the time is we don't have labels on our product. So how do we automate that? And that comes back to some of those technology questions that we asked. Well, how do I get that label on the product if our vendor does not send us anything? So mobile warehouse helps automate that process by applying the data, giving you some of the key elements of a label to work with a label printing solution like a bartender to be able to push that data to your label and out to the label printer in real time. So I can take that label off, apply it to the product, and now it's set, staged, and ready to be put away. So some of the key data elements, and this is a question we get a lot, is what should I put on my label? We don't do anything like that today. My recommendation or industry's best practice is to look at it and say, what information do I need to clearly identify the product if I don't have any system or tool in front of me, and without calling up to the office or talking to a manager to identify what the product is? That label could have things contained like the PO number, the stock code description, the lot or serial number if those items are lot traceable or serialized, and then the GRN number and today's date. If I looked at that information and brought that to somebody within control of within SYSPRO or of inventory, they're going to be able to completely understand what that product is and ultimately where did it come from. So we can hit print all. I get a print successful message. Label's been printed out, applied to the product in the staging location, and now it rolls into the put away process. And that is, in high level, PO receiving and some of the different things that you can do to solve what that customer's issue is having. SYSPRO is updated, inventories in its location in real time. I can clearly go and see where that inventory is, and it reduced all of that manual paperwork that we had to prior deal with and touch over and over and over again.
And so Garrett, I'm just going to interject real quick. So guys, just quick, very high level summary, and I don't mean to be redundant, but so what Garrett just walked you through is really that first customer story, right? So where he covered how they tackled some of the exact challenges that were discussed, like reducing manual data entry, improving accuracy, and how to get labels on products real time. It really helps speed up that receiving process. And so now for the second part of this demo, he's going to go more into the task management side of on the second customer story, showing you how to create tasks for bin replenishment and how that greatly improved this customer's efficiency, helping keep things organized to keep your team focused on more higher value work. Really goes back to some of those warehouse structure questions that we spoke about earlier and keeping everything labeled properly. So with that, Garrett, all yours.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, highlighting what the next steps, right? So you implement mobile warehouse to solve some of the immediate pain points that you do have. But now it's about growth within the system. So what can you do additional or on top of the day-to-day items, and how do we become more efficient? How do we become more scalable with the resources that we do have? So instead of using paperwork to start guiding users on what they should be doing with inventory, that's where tasks takes that away and gives you that flexibility to say, hey, Garrett, you're going to go and move this inventory from your staging location to its inventory overstock location. So we're going to open up tasks here, and we're going to take our task list. Now here on my handheld device, this is really what's driving me every single morning of what should I be doing on a day-to-day basis. So I have my tasks that are assigned to me specifically as a user, or if you choose to, depending upon your user base, you could just have them unassigned and users can work through all of the different tasks that you have throughout that given day. Now, Garrett might be a troubled employee, so I have to make sure he gets something specific so I can track him from a metric perspective. And the first thing that's within his queue, based off of priority in the sequence that is set, I have a high priority item to do my receiving put away. Now we just received in inventory, so this is perfect. So I'm going to select my put away process, and it's going to give me some of the details of the what should I be doing. So it's telling me that I need to transfer this product from this specific warehouse and bin location for this stock code, this quantity to this new bin location. Now, if I'm coming to do this task and I find that there's a problem with it, like I don't have the inventory that's there within that location, I can flag as an issue and report it back to my management team to say, I can't do this because of XYZ reason. And that's going to bring up a review process to say, why can't he perform that task? So now we're going to proceed with this. We're going to move forward with this, and it links me to that specific module to perform the task. Now, there is additional validation that you can put into place here. So I defaulted some of the key areas like warehouse and the from bin, the where I'm pulling the product from. Now, some of the validation that you can put in place is, do you allow like the stock code field to differ? Is it a different stock code? In theory, it shouldn't be. You should be moving what I'm telling you to move, right? So I can control that they just don't select something willy-nilly. And the same that goes for every additional field from quantity to the new bin location going forward. So we're going to scan our stock code here. We're going to move my stock code A112. And now I'm going to move a quantity of, let's say we're going to do a quantity of 98, right? We're going to validate that. So I entered the wrong quantity and it gives me an error message saying that's an invalid quantity and brings me back to that quantity field for me to apply the appropriate quantity, right? It might feel like we're slowing down to do these double checks consistently, but at the end of the day, inventory is money. So making sure we have accurate inventory does reign supreme. So we apply our quantity of 100 and we're going to bring it to our new bin location. Now that new bin location is going to be bin N1. I'd bring it to that location and I would scan that bin location here, and I'm going to ultimately post it. So I posted that transaction. Another example of a warning message came up as an optional thing if you do want to choose to do that. And this is just communicating to me that there's a stock take in progress for that stock code. Well, I have to transfer this, so I'm going to hit yes. And it brings me right back to my task list for me to perform the next transaction, which we received in a second line item. So we're going to perform that. So we're going to take in our lot traceable, again, telling me what I need to do, and I can proceed. Now, you have the choice of how much information do you pre-fill, how much do you want to validate before they transact against it. It's really what's going to work best within your environment, giving you that flexibility to play around with them. So we're going to move it from our bin N location. We're moving our stock code as I'm scanning my stock code here. We're going to move our quantity of 100. Going to apply my lot number that I'm moving. So we're moving 61825, and we're going to be moving it to this bin location. So I'm going to scan my bin location as I picked it up, move that pallet of product to bin FG, and we post. Again, same message comes up just over to enforce it. And finally, to my last task, and this is where that customer that's using this to do their replenishments after they're put away, say it's the next day and we have inventory that's in overstock, I need to move it down to the pick face location as we've depleted that pick face. So we're going to select our replenishment and we're going to proceed. Again, same practice still applies. We're moving it from this location from our overstock. We're using this specific stock code. We're moving this quantity, and we're going to our finished goods bin location within that warehouse because that's where we consume from, and ultimately post it, and we get our warning message to help us again. And now I have effectively worked through all of my tasks for that given day, and I can choose to either wait for more tasks to fill into my queue, or I can go on and do the other things that are necessary for me as an employee within this organization. So it's an effective tool to help guide me as the employee. What exactly am I supposed to be doing with that environment to avoid some of those, well, should I move it here or should I move it there, right? Questions that some employees might have, or for those new employees that are coming into your environment that aren't as familiar with either the inventory or the warehouse structure that they work within. All right, so we're going to move this back out now to our home screen, right? So it comes down to, as the employee, we've done all of these transactions, and now it's the what, right? They're working out there. I know they are. I see them through my window in my office doing what they're supposed to be doing, but the what that's behind it. So we've seen some of my trend lines adjust a little bit and telling me what those employees are doing. And then down below, I'm seeing a log of the history of those transactions and what exactly did that employee perform. And it does even come down to that point of, hey, this is software. What tools do we have to be able to effectively understand the intricacies that are happening behind the scene? So giving you the ability to see all of your log details of what exactly is communicating back and forth between our solutions of SYSPRO and Mobile Warehouse, and the details to each of that transaction. Now that I've logged all these transactions, you can take it that one step further and build those reports to be able to see in more granularity and more detail of what were those employees doing. So from a bin transfer perspective, I can see all the bin transfers that that one specific employee has done within that given date and time. And I can get a count of the number that he's doing. So I can effectively manage and put metrics around what is our expectations within a given day. What are the things that we need to do to avoid the problem or to surpass the problem and manage the expectations of the employee? All right, so bringing it back to the home screen, and we're going to bring it back out to the demo. Tech, Sir Ryan, anything to cover on what we just covered with the task management portion?
Yeah, so I mean, really just kind of wrapping things up. So most of the items we spoke about today really lead us towards leveraging technology to help us with our warehouse management wants, desires, and goals. Uh, it gives you facts and real-time data to make smart decisions to make your workers work more efficiently every day. Some examples that we looked at today is one, mobile apps, using a WMS tool to help you and help your team stay more productive, perform transactions or queries right there on the floor, whether they're picking, receiving, moving stock, replenishments, etc. You could use it for order picking management. You could leverage tasks as an example for an order picking management tool so that you make sure your pickers have clear and up-to-date pick lists, which cuts down on errors, speeds up your fulfillment. Pallet tracking, another way that you can handle those bulk movements, kind of like we spoke about earlier. And then finally, just like Garrett kind of showed, dashboards, giving you real-time KPIs and job visibility so that you always know what's happening on the floor. Again, to help you make decisions based on what? Facts and data. You want to make sure you're making all your decisions based on facts and data, not just gut feelings necessarily. And finally, labor tracking. Having a way to track your labor so that it lets you monitor productivity and find opportunities to improve your efficiency and throughput. And before we hop off to the next slide, I have to call out our QR code on the right-hand side of the slide. Please take out your phones, take out your cameras, screenshot the QR code. It's a quick link that brings you to a one-page guide on how to prepare for a successful implementation. So again, take out your phones, take a screenshot, save it for later. We need to make sure we put the plug out there for our implementation guide. So
Like,
go ahead, Garrett.
yeah. I was just going to say that guide's really helpful. It does list out some of the questions that we covered today, to be able to identify, where should we start, right? That's one of the hardest things that you can do in just your day-to-day life is where do we start, right? So how do I get to my starting point so I can understand where am I ultimately going as that organization? Something that's quite beneficial for anybody to use. And no matter what software project that you're thinking about working on, it's really all encompassing at the end of the day and giving you a guideline. All right, so that brings us to our Q&A session here. So if there is any questions that you do have, feel free to throw it either in the chat or the Q&A field. We'll give you guys a few minutes as I do see one already there. So we'll answer that question. And Mike Woodley answered or asked if it's a serial number that has a barcode, could you capture it by scanning? And the answer to that is yes. If you do have a serial number that is within a barcode, you can scan that barcode to apply the serial number within the transaction or within the module. And that goes for every single module, whether if it's going to be PO receiving, transfers, stock takes, job issue, kit issue, job receipts, anything that you're transacting against, you can do that. Now, one of the nice features, if you wanted to take it that next step further, is leveraging what we call Smart Scan. So a Smart Scan is the ability to have multiple pieces of data within one QR code or 2D barcode, where if you scan that 2D barcode, it'll take all of the data points and place it into the associated fields to make that scanning more effective. We're going to see more and more of that come in, especially if you're working with bigger vendors, you know, whether if it's the Walmarts of the world, Amazon, any of those bigger vendors are trying to create formats that are more efficient for those devices to use.
Okay. One of the questions that we typically get as we wait for others to ask some additional questions is how long does it typically take to implement PO receiving? Ryan.
Yeah, so I can take that. So PO receiving, I would say, is typically a pretty quick turnaround. It's one of the first places that we like to typically implement WMS because it's really the part in your process that you can add the most value to right away. Especially if you already do have suppliers that have barcodes on their product, you can leverage those third-party supplier barcodes to do your receiving process and or utilize PO receiving to then label your product as you're bringing it in. So typically, I think you could start implementing PO receiving and have it live. I mean, within 30 days. I see no issues with that.
Okay. Garrett, here's another one. How does the software work with outside 3PL facilities?
That's a great question. So if you do have a 3PL location, and what's very common nowadays, especially with some of the new hardware that's available, is you use it within your one physical location, and then you have your 3PL that might receive in goods for you, or they might hold goods for you before it goes out to that customer from a direct standpoint. So from a 3PL, if the employees within that 3PL are willing to, you can ship them some devices. And what you would do is on those devices, they actually have a VPN connection. So if they're connected to that 3PL's wireless infrastructure or their Wi-Fi, and you set the VPN connection back to your specific structure or your infrastructure for your network, that's going to allow you to have access to mobile warehouse to be able to perform any transactions within that 3PL location and manage what you think is your inventory in SYSPRO, where it physically exists within the 3PL, giving them that ability to do any transfers of it or stock takes of it or cycle counts of it, or process any of the sales order, you know, picking or even the PO receiving processes as well. So giving that flexibility for those 3PLs to leverage mobile warehouse.
Maybe one more here. How do I have to implement the software for all of my warehouse workflows, or can we start with just one?
Yeah, and I'll take that one as well. So typically, I like to work in more of a phased approach when we do handle implementations. So you can start with just a segmented part of the operation and start implementing just part of WMS. So whether that's purchase order receiving, or you just want to start with your inventory, maybe you just want to do warehouse transfers and bin transfers, as that handles 90% of your transactions. So really, it's up to the team and up to the team that's going to be handling this implementation or handling WMS as to where the most value is to implement first. However, if you want to implement everything all in one swing, that is great as well. Do that all the time. It really comes down to what the kind of needs and desires of the operation is.
So Ryan, how long does it normally take to complete an implementation?
So we like to say that we want to get an implementation wrapped up and live within 90 days. That's typically what we shoot for. Again, it kind of goes back to what I spoke about earlier, where it's really how engaged and how ready is the team to get something implemented like this. It's something that I've seen go live in as short as 2, 3 weeks, but I've also seen it can drag out if you don't have the right resources in place and willingness really to put in the work to test and to get it live. So really it could vary quite a bit, but I would say that there's no problem in getting it up and live, within that 30 to 90 days.
Right, well, that looks like that's the end of our questions. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
All right. Thank you again. Appreciate everybody's time. If there is any further questions, feel free to reach out to your SYSPRO partner, or feel free to reach out to us directly, and we can always set up a time to go through your environment and further review and help provide you what's going to be that next step. What are the growth opportunities within your environment? And we look forward to hearing from you or any thoughts or feedback on today's webinar. Again, thanks everybody for attending. Talk to you next.